Hey, happy Sunday to everybody. Hope everyone's having a wonderful Sunday. I hope everyone has had a wonderful weekend at this point. Uh, for starters, I would like to thank everyone that has put comments in the comment section, giving me your input of some of the questions I had in concerns of how to run my channel, basically, and what changes to make and things of that sort. So for those of you that have put comments in the comment section, I heavily appreciate it. And for those that are going to, that want to, I would heavily appreciate you as well. Just keep it respectful. And now let's keep going. As the title of the video suggested, we are going to be driving through Fort Pierre, South Dakota. FYI, it's not pronounced Pierre; it's pronounced Pierre. Apparently, a lot of your South Dakota natives get very upset when you pronounce Pierre the wrong way, because Pierre, South Dakota, that's the capital of the state, which that video is going to be coming up most likely after this video. But this is Fort Pierre. Now, Fort Pierre is basically a military community, very heavy military presence. In fact, there is a military base right here in town. So Fort Pierre is located 2.5 miles west of Pierre. It's located on the, Pierre is located 2.5 miles from here, 2.5 miles west of here. It's on the other side of the Missouri River. And Fort Pierre is basically located smack dab in the middle of the states. In Stanley County. And as you guys will see, at least for the most part, this is a fairly nice little town off of the Missouri River. Now, the only part of town that I would say is a bit ran down would be the southwest side of town, which you guys will see later in this video. And the population here is 2,015 115 people, with a population growth of 1.8% as of the 2020 census. Now, this city was founded in 1867, but people began to settle here in 1832. And this city was used as a trading post during the fur trade industry. The fur trade industry was a very lucrative business in this region of the country during the early 19th century. Fort Pierre, and I'm gonna be honest with you folks, I'm kind of going on a limb here when I say what I'm getting ready to say, but I believe Fort Pierre was named after Pierre C. Jr., who was a major fur trader from St. Louis, Missouri. And I'm going to also assume that's where they got the name Pierre from. Now, I could be wrong. Anyone that knows the history a little better of this area, drop a comment below. Now, if you're looking for things to do here, there's a few things you can do here. Whatever you can't find here, you'll have to drive a few miles west in the Pierre. You got the South Dakota Rodeo Museum, the Fort Pierre Depot Museum, and you got the downstream rec center, which has camping. I think that's just a campsite. They might have places where you can put up tents, I'm not sure, but I know for a fact they do got hookups for those of you that are traveling in RVs, or you got travel trailers hooked onto your vehicle. Now, fortunately, the crime here is as it is in many parts of South Dakota. The crime here is very low. Both your violent and property crime are much lower than the national average. And your racial demographics are 86.5% white, 10.6% Native American, and 1.4% Hispanic. Now, this region of South Dakota is typically going to have a higher Native American population compared to other regions in the state. Like when I was doing my traveling, I found that there is a slightly larger Native American population towards the middle of the state, and also towards the west part of the state compared to the eastern part of the state. Now, unfortunately, there are certain communities here in South Dakota that are struggling. Now, I've done a couple of videos of those communities that I already posted on this channel. But one thing I noticed also is when you go to some of the more rural places here in South Dakota, places that are further from larger cities, places that are also going to be further from tourist attractions, you're going to find a fair amount of Native American communities that are rural, that are poor, and basically many of those communities are destitute. I don't mean to be disrespectful to anybody, I'm just calling it how I see it. It's kind of like where I'm at in Alabama. When you get further from some of your larger cities, and when you get further from areas in the state to where things are happening, and I'm talking about in a good way, you start to run into a lot of your rural communities down here they have a large black population. So basically, you're gonna, basically in some of these super small areas in South Dakota, you're gonna start to see more of those kind of communities if you were to travel this state. Except it's not gonna be black, it's gonna be Native American. Now, the next time I come to South Dakota, which I will be here again, sometime next year, maybe. But whenever I come here again, I'm gonna tour some of those communities, just so you guys get an idea of what it looks like. When I came this time around, I did not have time to explore those communities. This time around, I wanted to show you guys some of the tourist areas. I wanted to show you guys some of the other areas which I feel are nice areas. And to be quite frank with you people, I have never been to South Dakota before this particular trip. I've been to North Dakota only because I worked there for a while in the oil field, but I've never been to South Dakota. So when I took this trip to South Dakota in July, this was my very first time in South Dakota. So, yeah. So let's keep going. Alright, so anyhow, let's see. If you're looking to purchase a home here, your median home price is going to be $173,000. Don't get too excited. I know that sounds like a good number to many of you, but don't get too excited. The cheapest home that's currently for sale right now is priced at $223,000. And for that price, I'm gonna let you guys know right now, the houses you're gonna see even for 220 some grand, the houses are nothing special, they're nothing fancy. The houses are gonna be maybe not much larger than, I'm gonna say, 1,500 square feet. Your lot sizes are not gonna be much larger than maybe 7,000 square feet. So by no means are you gonna get anything special for that price. I mean, for that price, you're going to get just a basic, straight to the point house. Now, if that doesn't bother you and you're still considering moving here for one reason or another, whether it be this video or it be for other reasons, in that case, we're going to talk about the climate. Each year, you can expect an average of 29.4 inches of snow. And I can't really tell you what type of snow it's going to be because I'm not familiar with the climate in the middle of the state here. I mean, I'm going to say it's going to probably be more like your typical snow that you get in the Midwest. It's going to accumulate, and you'll have a nice, slushy, muddy mess at some point. And you can, when your kids irritate you during those days where maybe it might get so bad that they close school down, you can send your kid outside and tell them to go build a snowman before they get to eat their 3 o'clock snack. And I'm going to guess that most likely that's going to be the kind of snow that you'll get, given that you're in the middle of the state. And when it comes to rain, you don't really get a whole lot of rain. I mean, on average, you only get 16.72 inches of rain per year. And when it comes to the temperatures, and I think the temperatures is where, it might be a bit on the inaccurate side. Now, your January low temperature on average is 8 degrees. Now, 8 degrees for most of us is going to be super cold. But bear in mind, you're going to have a fair amount of days up here to where your temperatures are going to most likely dip into the negatives. You're going to have a fair amount of days to where your high is going to be in the negatives. And I'm talking as low as negative 30 some degrees, maybe even down to negative 40 some degrees. And then when you add the wind chill, now you're talking about negative 70 to negative 80 degrees with the wind chill. And I'm not talking Celsius, I'm talking Fahrenheit. Now for summers, just like any other part of South Dakota, your summers are relatively pleasant. For the most part, you don't have to deal with a whole bunch of humidity. Like if it's 85 degrees outside, for the most part, typically your temperatures are not going to get much above the mid 80s. So if it's 85 degrees outside and it's nice and sunny like it is on this video, you can step outside, you can walk around, you can enjoy the weather, you can get some vitamin D in your system, and you can do all that without having to sweat bullets. Now, granted, you will sweat a little bit, but you're not going to sweat like you would if you were, let's say, outside like this in the South, or outside like this even in Indiana. Because here in South Dakota, the humidity is considerably lower compared to even Indiana, the lower Midwest. Now, every so often during the summer, from what I've heard from many of the locals in this region of the country, you might get several days in a row. You might get anywhere from, I'll say, 1 day to several days in a row to where the temperatures will be in the triple digits and you will have higher than average humidity. Now, as far as temperatures being in the triple digits, again, you're only going to get that for a small handful of days per year. For the most part, temperatures in this region of the country, you're not going to have to worry about temperatures going much above the mid-80s. And as far as what I think of this town, I mean, obviously this is not an average town due to it being a military community. But outside of that, I don't think this would be a bad place to live, provided that you have the money to be able to afford the housing out here. Now, one thing I might do in a future video here in South Dakota is I might look up the wages of the average job out here, but I never get into the poverty level or the average income, because my attitude is, for one, there's so many people that are moving around that might do work online, and then there's other people that might move around that are entrepreneurs, so they work for themselves, or they got their own business or whatnot. And another thing is, and I would say for the most part, now sometimes you got certain regions of the country to where the pay is not proportioned well with the cost of living. I mean, you got places like Florida, for an example, to where that's a big problem. You got, and I would say probably for many people over on the West Coast, that also is an issue. And now in this region of the country, I could be wrong, but I'm going to say that for the most part, people that live in this region of the country feel that their pay is proportioned with the cost of living here in South Dakota. Now, granted, a lot of people are going to come and they're going to probably be in the comment section, and they're going to tell me that they only earn X amount of money, but their rent prices went from $700 a month back in, in 2021 to now this year in 2023. Maybe they're paying something ridiculous like $1,300 a month. And unfortunately, that type of issue is going on all over the country, and I know it's going on here in South Dakota, because if you go on my channel and you watch my homeless videos that I made in Sioux Falls, of me going to Walmart and buying some groceries to feed a few homeless people that were at the truck stop that I was sleeping at when I was touring Sioux Falls. I mean, not only does that illustrate the lack of affordable housing solutions for those people in Sioux Falls, but also I spoke to a few people who worked at the Denny's at that particular truck stop, and there were some employees that were actually living temporarily in their car because they were going through some issues with housing. I'm not going to get into the details of that, but I'm going to leave it like that. And then there was and I believe there was one other employee living in their vehicle that was also working at one of the restaurants at the truck stop that I was at. And I was talking to another employee also at the truck stop, and they were telling me how you had more people than ever before that were homeless, and they were turning themselves into the homeless shelter, seeking some type of assistance. Now, among some of the people that were homeless, I talked to one of them. I wanted them to go on my channel to do an actual interview, but he declined. He did not want to be on my channel. So I had no choice but to respect his wishes. However, he did tell me that, and what he told me really, sadly, it's really of no surprise, but basically what he told me was the homeless shelters don't help out homeless people. The majority of your homeless shelters, even the ones that are religious based, the only thing they really care about is making money. And I'm guessing the way they go about making their money is they open up their shelter, they have a business, and since they're providing a certain type of service, they probably have certain tax exemptions. I'm guessing, I don't know. I'm not a tax attorney, so I don't know. I'm just speculating at this point. But they probably get certain tax exemptions because they're doing what many of us would call God's work. But in reality, most shelters don't do God's work. Most shelters, that is, take money. Maybe they'll provide some shelter for a few people, and then the rest of the people that come along, they don't get nothing at all from what I've been hearing. They get, it's like, hey man, I'm sorry, we're full, we have no room type of deal. And I've even heard stories to where even though the shelter did have room, even though they did have beds available, they would tell people, no, I'm sorry, there's no room anyway. And I've also heard a fair amount of stories of shelters that ran poorly, and I put that mildly. Because there's shelters that, you got women that go to these shelters and, they get violated. They might get violated. Or you go to the shelter and everything that you own might be in a duffel bag. You wake up the next morning, some of them came and stole your shit. So I've heard many of those type of stories. And now out of one of the homeless people that I gave some groceries to, I mean, this individual was actually hitchhiking. He was trying to get to, I think he was hitchhiking to Montana. I forgot. But, I asked him, well, how you going to get back to Montana? He's like, I'm hitchhiking. And then I thought, okay, well, if you go to, I asked him, well, does Sioux Falls have a shelter? And he told me, I'm not going to no shelter. And I'm thinking, okay, well, if there's I don't know. I was just in my naive mind, I was just thinking that he can go to the shelter in Sioux Falls, which this side of the city, in correlation to the truck stop where I was at, where we were at. And I'm just thinking he can go over there, turn himself in, and maybe they'll give him a little bit of money, and he can take a Greyhound bus and he can get back home. But then he informed me that no, that's not how they do things. See, he was telling me how they did it at many of the homeless shelters where, I mean, basically in a nutshell, what they do is they do everything they can do to prolong you being homeless. Because if these shelters actually solve homeless issues and everyone eventually is provided some type of shelter, some type of housing, then these homeless shelters are going to go out of business. They will no longer be able to collect any type of donations. They will no longer be able to receive funds from the government. Means basically they're going to go out of business, and then the CEOs are not going to be making their money. So the only way that a lot of these CEOs who run these shelters make their money, I'm assuming, is they gotta have it to where they gotta run the shelters to where there's gonna always be a significant amount of individuals who are homeless, who are dependent on these shelters to provide shelter. And all right, folks, that's all I gotta say. That's my little commentary. So you guys enjoy the remainder of this video and have a rest of a wonderful weekend, and I will see you guys on the next video. Stay blessed out there.